Welcome back after the break now for the news in detail. We start from Sudan, where after months of negotiations, the ruling military council and the civilian opposition coalition have agreed on a constitutional declaration. African Union mediator Mohamed Hassan Labat says the deal will pave the way for a 3-year transitional government.
The long-awaited deal on the constitutional declaration triggered celebrations across Sudan. African Union mediator Hassan Labat says the pact outlines the powers of a joint civilian-military ruling body. It also dictates the deployment of security forces and immunity for generals over recent violence.
I am very happy to announce to the Sudanese people, the international and African people, that the two delegations have completely agreed on a constitutional declaration.
The power-sharing deal envisages a governing body of 6 civilians and 5 generals. Once the transitional government takes office, Sudan will undergo a 3-year transition leading to elections.
Meanwhile, forces loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar have killed 9 pro-government fighters in Libya. A military spokesman said 5 of them were killed in an airstrike south of Tripoli. The spokesman said a number of Haftar's fighters were killed in clashes, while government soldiers retook control of key positions. Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive in April to wrest control of Tripoli from the United Nations recognized government. Pro-GNA armed groups have weathered the initial onslaught, but over 1,000 people have been killed since then. Thousands of Algerians have marched through the capital Algiers, threatening civil disobedience. The protesters are demanding the resignation of Army Chief Ahmed Gaid Salah and interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah, amongst others. The deadlock between protesters and the government tightened since the army rejected preconditions for talks earlier this week. Israeli forces have wounded 42 Palestinians during weekly protests along the Gaza border. Palestine's health ministry says Israeli troops fired live ammunition and rubber bullets at the protesters. The ministry says 2 journalists were also among the wounded. The demonstrations called for Israel's blockade of Gaza Strip to be lifted. Officials say over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the start of weekly protests last year. Meanwhile, 3 Taliban leaders have been killed in an airstrike in western Farah province. The Afghan Defense Ministry says the shadow Taliban governor for Farah, Mullah Abdul Mari, was among the dead. The ministry did not say whether the raid was carried out by the Afghan Air Force or NATO-led coalition forces. Meanwhile, talks between the United States and the Taliban have resumed in Doha amid hopes of a peace deal. A withdrawal of US forces and a Taliban pledge to prevent terrorist attacks from Afghanistan have dominated the discussions. US Special Envoy Khalilzad says the Taliban are signaling they would like to conclude an agreement. He says the US is ready for a peace deal, allowing it to withdraw forces from Afghanistan. Khalilzad says a US troop withdrawal would depend on conditions in the battle-scared country. The European Union has nominated Bulgarian economist Kristalina Georgieva as its candidate to lead the International Monetary Fund. She secured a clear lead against former Dutch finance minister after 2 rounds of voting by EU ministers. Georgieva would take over from Christine Lagarde, who has resigned to head up the European Central Bank. Ms. Georgieva is currently the chief executive of the World Bank. Georgieva says she will take an absence leave from her World Bank responsibilities during the IMF nomination period. Candidates from the head of the IMF must be put forward by September 6th. The IMF plans to select its new chairperson by 4th of October. Now, NATO says it has agreed on ways to deter Russia from deploying a new medium-range nuclear missiles after the collapse of a Cold War treaty. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says NATO's response will be measured and only involves conventional weapons.
The collapse of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty by the US and Russia has become a matter of serious concern for major world powers. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg says new Russian missiles can hit European cities within minutes.
Russia has deployed the SSC-8 missile system. The new Russian missiles are nuclear capable, mobile, and hard to detect. They can reach European cities with only minutes of warning time.
Britain and Poland blame Russia for the treaty's collapse, but China criticized the US for leaving the accord. Its foreign ministry spokeswoman says the move shows Washington's ignorance of its international commitments.
The withdrawal is another negative move by the US to pursue unilateralism in disregard of its international commitments, aiming to shake off the bindings by itself and seek unilateral military and strategic advantages.
Germany has warned that Moscow and Washington's decision to scrap the treaty would have serious consequences for European security. Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says a failure to agree on rules for disarmament risks a new arms race.
Moving on, the US has imposed a second round of sanctions on Russia over the alleged poisoning of former spy Sergei Skripal in Britain last year. The new sanctions prevent Russia seeking financial assistance from World Bank and the IMF. The UK and the US accuse Moscow of attacking Skripal and his daughter with a nerve agent, but Russia denies its involvement in the crime. Moscow says the move will hurt already strained US-Russia ties. Washington imposed an initial batch of sanctions last year. The White House says new sanctions have been imposed because Russia failed to provide the assurances required under US law. United States President Donald Trump says North Korea's missile tests may have violated United Nations resolutions. However, he said the test did not break his agreement with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. President Trump said President Kim has not disappointed him and there is far too much for North Korea to gain. The president said Kim has a beautiful vision for his country. Trump said only the United States, with him as president, can make Kim's vision come true. The US president's statement comes after North Korea conducted a series of missile tests. Three people have been killed and two more injured after a cliff collapsed at a popular Southern California beach. California's lifeguard department say the sandstone cliff collapsed at the Grandview Beach in Encinitas, a suburb north of San Diego. The slice of rock fell 15 feet onto the beach and its people. The area is highly popular with local residents, surfers and holiday makers. Officials say a woman died at the scene while two people died in the hospital. Norway says Venezuelan officials and opposition representatives have repeated their willingness to agree on a constitutional solution. The statement came after US President Donald Trump said he is considering whether to impose a quarantine or blockade on Venezuela. Norway's foreign ministry says the two sides are continuing talks on Barbados and Venezuela's political crisis. Opposition negotiator Stalin Gonzalez thanked Norway for its mediation. Meanwhile, President Nicolas Maduro rejected US threats of a possible blockade. He says Venezuela's seas will remain free and independent. Maduro says he asked his UN ambassador to denounce the US threats at the Security Council. He says the US takes harsh steps whenever a dialogue is in progress. President Donald Trump says rapper ASAP Rocky is on his way back to the US after being released from jail in Sweden. Earlier, a Swedish judge ordered the release of Rocky and his two friends until the verdict on assault charges is announced on August 14th. The three men were detained on July 3rd after a street brawl. India's Supreme Court says mediation has failed to bring about a settlement in the Ayodhya land dispute case. It has now ordered a series of day-to-day hearings which will commence on August 6th.
The destruction of the Mughal-era Babri Mosque in 1992 triggered one of the worst episodes of sectarian violence in India's post-partition history. 2,000 people died in the riots that followed. Hindu radicals claimed the mosque stood on the birthplace of their god, King Rama. A land dispute over the contested holy site followed, fueling tensions between Hindus and Muslims.
We welcome whatever the Honorable Supreme Court has said in the matter of Babri Masjid Ayodhya case.
The Hindu Mahasabha's legal team has welcomed the Supreme Court's move.
Today, Supreme Court has said that we'll hear the matter on day-to-day basis from 6th of August. Supreme Court has further directed that suit number 3, which is of Nirmohi Akhada, and suit number 5, which is of Ram Lalla Virajman, will be taken up first. And that's why that's a very good sign for all of us.
The development comes at a time of increased ethnic strife in the country. The rise of the BJP, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, coincided with increased anti-Muslim sentiment. Muslims make up 14% of India's population of 1.3 billion.
Meanwhile, in Indonesia, one person has been killed and many others injured after a powerful undersea earthquake struck off the islands of Sumatra and Java. Indonesia's disaster agency says the 6.8 magnitude quake destroyed 34 houses and damaged dozens of other buildings. It said over 1,000 residents were evacuated after a tsunami warning, which was later withdrawn. Coming up next in the Bulletin. In UK, entrance and seating area of a church have been turned into a mini golf course. Argentina captain Lionel Messi has been banned from international football for 3 months. Welcome back. The President-elect of the European Commission has proposed a new pact on migration and asylum seekers. Ursula von der Leyen met Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte in Italy. EC President Leyen and Prime Minister Conte discussed migration and overcoming political division. She said migration is inherent in a globalized world and it will not go away. Leyen said Europe needs a new kind of burden-sharing framework with countries like Italy, Greece and Spain. These countries are geographically more open to migration.
Especially when it comes to burden sharing. Yes, indeed, I think we need a new kind of burden sharing. And I'm aware of the fact that countries like Italy, like Greece, like Spain are in an exposed geographical position.
Meanwhile, in Mexico, the government has opened a shelter for migrants in the border city of Ciudad Juarez. The facility is meant to house Central American people waiting for their asylum claims to be processed by the U.S. More in this report.
The US has sent over 15,000 Central American people to Mexico since January. This means having to build shelters like the Leona Vicario Integral Center for Migrants. In June, Mexico made an agreement with Washington to cut the number of migrants traveling from Central America to the US.
What we are doing is fulfilling a promise signed between the governments of Mexico and the United States for a larger issue, which is to avoid any intention at that time of the so-called tariffs.
US asylum cases can take years to reach a conclusion. Large backlogs mean scheduling a simple hearing can take months.
Well, I walked to the United States, but no, they sent us back here to Mexico with no hope, with no place to stay, but rather out here on the street. They just sent us to the bus station, and that was it. And we're here for nothing, with no hope, because they don't have a shelter for us.
All this is taking place under a US policy called the Migration Protection Protocols. Human rights groups have condemned the program, saying it endangers migrants by putting them in some of Mexico's most violent cities. They say children are particularly at risk, especially to gang recruitment and sexual abuse.
Moving on, Congo says it has lost track of an Ebola outbreak, which has cost 1,800 lives over the last year. Chief Ebola researcher Jean-Jacques Muyembe says only 50% of Ebola cases are detected. He warned the current deadly outbreak could last up to 3 years. Muyembe says a man who died this week in the city of Goma near the Rwandan border has 10 children. He says the man may have infected an unknown number of people. Goma's first Ebola case was detected in mid-July. Since then, the World Health Organization has warned the spread of disease could accelerate. The death toll from a dengue outbreak in Bangladesh has risen to 44 in less than a month. The Health Department report says the mosquito-borne disease has infected over 21,000 people this year. The report says over 1,600 new cases have been reported across the country. Since the year 2000, around 60,000 Bangladeshis have been diagnosed with the disease. More than 300 have died. Churches and cathedrals are associated with peace and calm. Rochester Cathedral in Kent is a little different. The cathedral authorities have turned the entrance and seating area into a mini golf course. More in this report.
Churches haven't changed much over the centuries, but Reverend Matthew Rushton has taken a radical new approach to attracting youth to his faith. He has turned his cathedral's entrance into a mini golf course, saying this will spark interest in Christianity.
Well, the Archbishop of Canterbury said recently that if you can't have fun in cathedrals, then you don't know what fun is, and he's absolutely right. So partly this is about people having fun in the cathedral, getting people perhaps who haven't been here before to come into the cathedral, but it also has a serious educational purpose as well.
There has been a mixed reaction to Reverend Matthew Rushton's approach. Traditionalists have criticized the move via Twitter, saying it violates the sanctity of the cathedral. Others say the mini golf course makes the church more inviting.
They are running around having an absolute brilliant time. I think they're kind of quite shocked not to see all the chairs in here as normal when we're coming down, and it doesn't feel like sort of dingy to them, whereas normally when we're down here to them it's quite cold and not inviting. So today they're absolutely enjoying it.
The mini golf course is not a permanent feature and will only be around until September the 1st. Whether kids will still enjoy coming to the church remains to be seen.
Meanwhile, Lithuania has witnessed a surge in tourism since the miniseries Chernobyl aired on HBO. It also reopened old wounds suffered during Lithuania's time as part of the Soviet Union. More in this report.
Chernobyl is based on one of the world's worst nuclear accidents at a plant in Ukraine. Many scenes were filmed in Lithuania's Ignalina nuclear power plant, which has been decommissioned since 2009. The series revived the tourism industry in the Baltic country, but also brought back some bad memories.
My main health problems were the thyroid gland, high blood pressure. My teeth also started falling out. Not all of them, but I could take them out myself. No doctor needed.
After the Chernobyl disaster, Soviet leadership sent an estimated 7,000 Lithuanians to take part in the cleanup effort. Surviving workers are still struggling against health issues linked to the cleanup. They say their case still needs to be addressed by the government.
We still believe that this plant shouldn't exist, but we will do the utmost in order to make sure that it will be as less as possible detrimental.
For now, the Lithuanian government is preoccupied with another nuclear power-related worry. Moscow is building a nuclear plant near the country's shared border, which poses a threat to Lithuania's safety and national security.
Now, at the Pan American Games in Peru, Mexico has won the gold medal in the men's 10-meter synchronized diving finals. Canada's duo took silver, while Brazil claimed the bronze. Team Mexico's Kevin Reyes and Ivan Navarro finished on top with a total score of 431.1. Silver medal winner Nathan Sombor Murray and Vincent Rionder were 65 points behind. Brazil's pair finished with a score of 375.8 and took bronze. Meanwhile, boxer Jessica Paula won Colombia's 11th gold medal. She knocked out American Naomi Graham in the middleweight category final. The South American Football Confederation has banned Argentina's captain Lionel Messi from international football for 3 months. This comes after he called the Copa America a corrupt tournament that was fixed to ensure Brazil's victory. The South American Federation also fined Barcelona legend Messi $50,000. He has 7 days to appeal CONMEBOL's decision. Messi will miss Argentina's upcoming friendlies against Chile, Mexico and Germany. Manchester United have reached an agreement to sign England centre-back Harry Maguire from Leicester for $97 million. The deal makes Maguire the world's most expensive defender. The 26-year-old is expected to complete a medical at the club this weekend. He becomes United's third summer signing following Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Daniel James. Maguire made 69 Premier League appearances for Leicester after joining from Hull City in 2017. The deal eclipses the £91 million Liverpool paid for Virgil van Dijk last week. Now, Brazil captain and right-back Dani Alves has joined Brazilian football club Sao Paulo on a free transfer. He left Paris Saint-Germain after the end of his contract in June. Alves has signed a 3-year contract which takes him on to 2022. The Brazilian defender is the only player to win 40 trophies across club and international football. Alves has also won 2 Copa America with Brazil, including this July's tournament. Sao Paulo called Alves the most victorious player in the history of football. Now let's have a look at the weather update. Well, with the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.